Hello, and welcome to another look with Christian King. Today I am going to be doing my UFC 226 recap show. I'm a day late on this. I recorded yesterday and had some technical difficulties, so I'm probably going to keep this one pretty brief, just mostly focus on the main event, the bizarre co-main event. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into this. So first thing, I was at the beach last weekend, so I didn't have a chance to put out any updated picks or anything that changed. Obviously, Max Holloway fell off the card with concussion issues. I hear that they're taking excellent care of him and getting his situation figured out. He could be out for a long time. TJ Grant was close to a title shot at lightweight back in, I think, 2013, and he's never fought again since then because of concussion-like symptoms, so we'll have to see where Holloway goes. And then the other main thing that I would have liked to have gotten to update would be Michael Chiesa missing weight and looking terrible. I picked him on Sunday when I did my preview show. Probably would have changed that pick after seeing him on the scales, or at least have changed it to him maybe winning a decision if he gets some control time, but definitely not him looking great and getting a submission, because once I saw him on the scale, I was pretty sure he wasn't going to perform like himself. All right, so DC is the champ. Pretty awesome stuff. I'm a huge DC fan. I was very excited about this. It was a great fight. We're going to ignore all of the cringy WWE stuff that happened afterwards with Brock. I can't wait to see Daniel Cormier knock Brock out. I think he'll knock Brock out very easily. I think it'll look a lot like Brock's loss to Kane, except he might get truly KO'd instead of being TKO'd. So I can't wait to see that. But other than that, we're not really going to talk about that. DC was able to beat Stipe. I picked DC, but I did pick him by more likely a 5-round decision, or maybe a very late stoppage would have been my second choice. And part of that was a pick with my heart. I did mention that Stipe is very dangerous at close range, which is where Daniel Cormier won the fight, as I knew he would need to be in close to do any good work. So what happened here? So the best way to put it is that Daniel Cormier needed Stipe to fight his fight. So he needed to fight Stipe at close range. Stipe could have chosen to keep a long range and just put his jab out there and throw leg kicks, and using his footwork maybe could have cruised to a decision, or maybe stopped Daniel if he was able to get off a good right hand. But we talked about how Stipe is more known for his short range power, and he actually tends to fight his smaller opponents in a closer range, as he did in the Mark Hunt fight and the Roy Nelson fight. So we thought that they would be in a close range fight where they both had opportunities to win, and that was the case. Part of how I think DC did this is he used a little bit of trickery, which he has from his years and years of competing. The man's 39 years old. He's a former Olympic wrestler, he wrestled in college, he's been with USA Wrestling since I think he was 16. So he knows how to kind of trick opponents into doing what he wants. So I think a lot of what DC did was he kind of like a boxer will just defend themselves and kind of wait and see what you have and let you build your confidence. I think DC kind of did that with the clinch situation. He let Stipe have the better position, and he let Stipe feel big and strong, and kind of just, you could tell he was just loose in there. He wasn't really fighting that hard as Stipe was turning him around and moving him around, and that gave Stipe the confidence to continue a close range fight. And then what we noticed right away was that now DC did have his fingers out a lot. I didn't like that. I don't like seeing that. I feel like guys should be able to control that. So I wasn't a fan of that, but he did poke Stipe in the eye, and the ref called a time, and Stipe was given time to recover, but he was staying busy in Stipe's face. Obviously, one of those was an eye poke, but a lot of them were just good, clean jabs. And he threw in a couple good overhands in there, and then eventually finished the fight with the right hook. Before they ended up in that clinch situation where he was able to get his arm free and come around the guard of Stipe with that right hook that finished the job, he landed a really good jab that seemed to stun Stipe for a second. DC looked like he was hitting very hard. Now, he weighed in at 248, which is the heaviest he's ever weighed in at, as far as I know, for any fight. Maybe one of his earlier heavyweight fights, he was heavier than that, but I always remember him, I think 248, definitely the most he's weighed in a long, long time. So he actually, so I think he had a lot of weight behind those punches. I guess he did suffer a thrown out back at some point in his training camp, so that could have contributed to him keeping that much weight on, having to take a couple secretive weeks off from training, which I'm surprised that news didn't get leaked ever. DC must have good people around him who can keep a secret, but apparently he was injured for a few weeks and couldn't train. So, but he, regardless of whether he fully intended to or not, he had a lot of weight, extra weight behind those punches, and that seemed to pay off. He was really marking Stipe up with every shot he was throwing. So he looked like he had some serious power, and I loved how rather than doing his usually when he's in the clinch, he likes to throw uppercuts kind of with a collar tie, and I loved how he just kind of looped around the guard with that right hand. Apparently that's something he's been working on with his boxing coach. So yeah, DC looked great. He's the double champ now. I was very happy about that. I was rooting for him. Didn't think it'd be a first round knockout, but it was an awesome moment, and Stipe, as usual, was all class in victory and in defeat, in this case defeat. Classy guy. He's got a daughter on the way, so I'm sure he's already so excited about that he's forgotten about the loss. Not entirely, but at least put it in the back of his mind. So I'm sure he's doing fine. Look forward to seeing both these guys back in there, and definitely look forward to seeing DC knock Stipe out. Looking forward to seeing DC knock Brock Lesnar out. That's going to be awesome. Okay, so next up, or before that, we had Derek Lewis taking on Francis Ngannou. I picked Ngannou by round 1 because I thought that he was at least somewhat the same fighter as he was before Stipe put that 5-round drubbing on him and, excuse me, possibly stole a little bit of his soul. So Ngannou looked incredibly unconfident. He looked very timid. He looked very afraid of getting hit. It was definitely not the Ngannou we saw before the Stipe fight. So he's going to have to figure something out. I think Joe Rogan said it best. He said, this guy doesn't need different coaches. He needs a sports psychologist. And I agree with that. I think he needs to get his confidence back, and he needs to understand that just because you lose one and get beaten dominantly, that doesn't mean that you suck. Like, he has an incredible potential, and I really hope to see him get on track. As for Derek Lewis, his constant back problems, he's had that back injury. It's like a mystery back injury. He hasn't gotten it properly looked at. I think the UFC needs to step in there and get him the proper treatment and see what's wrong, because he made a comment in the post-fight press conference about how he thinks he just might need to stretch more and lose a little weight, but he seems to have, his back locks up on him. That's not something that happens because you don't stretch enough. He's got something wrong with the disc, or I'm not sure what. I'm not a doctor, but he needs to get that professionally checked out. This was a very boring fight. I wasn't that bored because I couldn't stop laughing. As soon as the first 2 minutes went by, I realized that this was going to be a hilarious staring match where no one did anything, and I was already excited. After the first 2 minutes, all I could think about is, I can't wait to listen to Joe Rogan freaking out by the third round, and that was hilarious to me. Joe Rogan was losing his mind and just wildly speculating as if it was the world's greatest mystery what was happening. I don't think it was a big mystery. I think Derek Lewis's back hurt, and Francis Ngannou only felt confident enough to counterpunch. So when Derek Lewis didn't throw any offense other than switch kicks, then Ngannou had nothing to counter. I don't think it was that big a mystery. I don't think it was that perturbing. I think it's pretty straightforward. One guy wanted to counterpunch, the other guy didn't give him anything to counterpunch, so that's what you get. But it was hilarious. But Dana White was very unhappy, obviously, as were, I'm sure, every fan other than me who couldn't stop laughing. But yeah, I still would have preferred a really good fight, of course. I would have preferred a really good fight to spending my money on a pay-per-view and laughing at the co-main event. So, but I made the most of it. So yeah, we'll move on from that one. Hopefully Derek Lewis can get his back figured out, and Francis Ngannou can get his mind figured out, and we can see what else those guys can do. So before that, we had Paul Felder taking on Mike Perry. I picked Felder to finish in the third round. Instead, Perry picked up a split decision. Right off the bat, these two guys smacked heads and were both bleeding, cut on the hairline, and you could tell it was going to be a bloody fight because they were already bleeding the first movements that they made with that unfortunate clash of heads. So, so they just went to war from there. I haven't watched the fight since it happened, and it's now Monday evening, so I can't give a good play-by-play, but if you're listening to this, I'm sure you watched the fight. It was a ton of fun. At some point in the later half of the fight, Perry landed a huge left hook that opened up a monster cut right to the side of Paul Felder's right eye. And that cut, I mean, Paul Felder was just a mask of blood. Apparently, Paul Felder broke his arm, I believe, attempting a spinning back fist where his forearm landed on the forehead of Mike Perry, which is a great recipe for a broken arm. So they went to war. Paul Felder's tough as nails, definitely the toughest UFC commentator that I can imagine, although DC's pretty tough too. Sorry, Dominic Cruz, you're not as tough as those guys, but obviously he's a great fighter. Dominic Cruz might be the most mentally tough guy on that commentating team, although if Bisping gets in that mix, which it looks like he's working his way up to commentator from the desk, then I guess Bisping will be the toughest guy on that crew. But, anyways, Paul Felder, very impressed with him. Super fun fight, and, may need to start doing, now obviously I just do my picks for fun, but, I do think maybe I'll start trying to make a little more time for some research before I make my picks. Not film study, I don't have time for that, but for instance, if I had known that Mike Perry, I didn't know until I was listening to an interview Saturday driving home from the beach before the fights. That was when I learned that Mike Perry had gone out to Jackson Winklejohn and was actually going to be game planning for this fight. Now, obviously, his opponent changed, but they still had enough time to do some game planning, and they really seemed to be kind of taming Mike Perry to where he's more of a controlled brawler, more of a technical brawler, which I think will carry him a lot farther than just his go-to-war style. You can't have a long career if you just go to war all the time. Your brain can't handle that for your whole career. So that was a ton of fun. Last thing I'm going to say about that fight is shout out to the doctor. I think the ref was Herb Dean, called in the doc to look at that crazy cut. As soon as Paul Felder's to the side of his eye got busted open and they had a pause in the action, the ref broke it up, called in the doctor, and the doctor looked at it and he said, yeah, I'm not really that worried about that. I'm pretty sure that was verbatim what he said, which I'm sure what he meant is the placement of the cut being to the side of the eye. The blood is not going to run into the eye. Their main concern is the cut either getting so big that it impacts the eye itself, or there being so much blood in the eye that the fighter can't see and therefore can't properly defend themselves and can't have the proper depth perception to use good defensive fundamentals. So that doctor was awesome. So yeah, we're just gonna kind of, I'm gonna highlight some stuff, talk about what happened, but we're gonna get through these last ones quick. This will probably be the longest I spend on any of these other ones. Will be this next one. Anthony Pettis submitted Michael Chiesa in the second round, which, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I would have changed my pick to either maybe Chiesa by decision or Chiesa losing by split decision. I didn't think Pettis would submit him, so either way that surprised me, but Chiesa definitely looked terrible from the very beginning of this fight. No surprise after the bad weight cut. He says this is his last fight at lightweight. He will be moving up to 170 pounds welterweight for his next fight. He's way too big, he cuts way too much weight, and he looked terrible. I actually thought I liked Michael Chiesa, but I mean, obviously I don't know these guys. Kind of found myself rooting for Anthony Pettis after Chiesa. Anthony Pettis said to him at the weigh-ins, like, hey man, you didn't make weight. Like, you can't talk shit if you don't make weight. And Michael Chiesa said, I'll see you in Bellator, insinuating that Anthony Pettis is going to get cut after he loses another fight. And, I don't know. I thought that was a little bit unclassy. He's lucky Anthony Pettis took the fight in the first place after Chiesa missing weight. And then before the fight, Chiesa did some really goofy routine with Bruce Buffer as his name was being called out. They were doing like some not choreographed, but they were doing like some in unison like hand gestures towards each other. And I just thought that was pretty corny, so I couldn't help but cheer for Pettis a little bit. The fight was good. But like I said, Mike Chiesa, he didn't look good at all. He looked flat-footed. He looked like he had a bad weight cut. He looked slow. His striking looks like it hasn't improved at all since The Ultimate Fighter. And he's not at a gym known for striking, so I guess that's not a huge surprise, but I still feel like he has more potential. I'd love to see him train with some different people. Anthony Pettis looked great. He apparently has this new thing where he's decided, I learned this also in the car, listening to interviews on the way back from the beach. Anthony Pettis said that he's decided he's wasted way too much time worrying about defending takedowns, and he needs to go back to being a fearless striker who attacks with submissions when he's threatened with a takedown. And it looked like that worked against Chiesa. Now, good luck doing that against Khabib or Kevin Lee. That strategy isn't going to work at all against them, so I don't think it'll carry him to another title, but I do think Anthony Pettis is going to be a lot more fun to watch from now on than he was when he kind of got used to just always using the fence to defend takedowns for the whole fight. Those fights weren't terribly entertaining for any of us. Before that, Khalil Roundtree missed the memo. They forgot to send him the email that he was supposed to get knocked out because he knocked out Gokhan Saki, who's a kickboxing legend. No one saw that coming, promise. No one saw that. Maybe some degenerate gambler put a few bucks on it, but that wasn't something that any analysts were calling. I guess it looked to me like Saki, I'm not going to say he looked flat because he is always going to look relaxed. He's been kickboxing for so long. Why would he be afraid of a striking match against an MMA fighter? But it definitely looked like Roundtree was faster than he expected. And really, I think it was like in the first 90 seconds before anything really got going, Saki, I think it was a counter off a leg kick, but just a straight left hand from the southpaw stance right down the middle and knocked him out, dropped him. His eyes, as in the words of Khalil Roundtree, I saw that his eyes were all over the place, so I decided to go to the ground and finish him. So Khalil showed some patience, some maturity, and I kind of liked, he had a little fire after the fight. He said, I got all these messages on social media from so-called MMA fans telling me you're going to get knocked out, and he said, that hurt because I'm your guy. I'm the MMA fighter. He's the kickboxer. You're supposed to have my back. You're your MMA fans. You got to have my back. So, obviously I didn't pick him to win this fight. I don't think anyone did, but I would also never message him on social media and tell him, you're going to get knocked out. That's just, so I first off, I would say he should not be wasting his time reading what people are saying on social media. No one should waste their time doing that. But, I also don't blame him for taking that a little bit personally, considering that he's the MMA fighter. All right, so that opened up the main card. So going all the way back to the main event of the Fox Sports 1 prelims, we had Paulo Costa finishing Uriah Hall by second round TKO or KO. I picked him by round 1 KO, which he came a little bit close to, but Hall did hang in there pretty tough. So basically, Paulo Costa, definitely something about this guy. I was pretty excited as soon as he came out to the cage. I kind of had that sense of excitement. It kind of reminded me, I'm not trying to be over the top, but it kind of reminded me of when Conor McGregor and Marcus Brimage were getting ready to fight, and it was Conor's, and that was a little different because that was Conor's debut, whereas this was more Paulo Costa's first big card that he was on. But still, just kind of that, like, I probably shouldn't be this excited for this guy, but I just feel the excitement, just kind of an organic feeling that I had. I think he will be the next big star for Brazil. I don't know if he's going to be a champion, but I think Brazil needs some young guys, and I think he's the guy. Had a little bit of dirty stuff in there, a little too much fingers sticking out towards the eyes, a couple accidental low blows. I think he's just so aggressive that he sometimes accidentally commits fouls. I'm sure that'll get cleaned up, but I don't think he was doing anything intentionally dirty. By the end of round 1, I felt that Uriah Hall was already starting to break, and then he actually stood his ground more at the start of round 2, and he was able to hurt. He was landing some good stiff jabs that were really starting to swell up the lip and kind of bust up the nose and mouth area, just right down the middle jabs of Paulo Costa. And then Uriah Hall landed, it might have been just a good right hand behind that, but he kind of momentarily stunned Paulo Costa, who then kind of did the whole classic, like, oh no, that didn't hurt, bring it on, which usually means a guy's hurt, and I think he was hurt, but then he just stormed back and was able to stop Uriah Hall. I think he had some good hooks in there and a good uppercut, a couple good body shots, put him down, went to follow up, and the ref pulled him off, and that was all she wrote. Seems to be working on his English. Now, I talked in the preview show about how he changed his nickname from Bohashinia to the Eraser, which is what that means in English. I don't like that. Listen, I love all the cultures of MMA. I really wish he still went by Bohashinia. You can learn how to say that if you're American. Not all Americans are completely uninterested in other cultures. I'm not some world-traveling person, but I definitely enjoy the other cultures in sports. It's part of why I love the World Cup. It's definitely part of why I love MMA. So I would encourage this guy, learn English. That's great. It's great to reach all the fans, but definitely don't just fully try and become American. Stick to your roots. You're a Brazilian, you're a proud Brazilian, and you have great Brazilian supporters. So definitely don't leave them behind. Don't make them feel like they don't have you on their side anymore. They want one of their own. So definitely keep working on your English. He sounds great. Sounds like it's coming along. Definitely needs a little help sometimes and asks his translator, but you can tell he's making an effort. He hates when the translator speaks for him. He really wants to say it himself. I think that's cool, but definitely hope he doesn't completely try and abandon his Brazilian roots and go all in on the American fans, because I think those Brazilian fans are starving for another young up-and-comer. They really need one. They don't have a lot going on right now. They've got they've got some really good women going on right now, but not a whole lot in men's MMA at the moment as far as big UFC stars go. Okay, so before that, good old Rafael Assunção. I talked about how reliable he is and how Rob Font's dynamic, but Rafael Assunção is reliable and you can really count on him, and that's exactly what happened. I picked him to win by unanimous decision. He won by unanimous decision. He had a nice knockdown from a sneaky counter right in the first round. He got a takedown at the very beginning of round 2 and controlled for the first half up until I think the 240 mark, so a little more than halfway, and then coasted with some counter striking to win that round. And then in the third round, he coasted with a little counter striking and then hit the takedown with 2 minutes left and hunted for a submission for the whole last 2 minutes and almost had one. He got pretty close to a Kimura. He was trying to step over the head. He looked like he was maybe thinking about switching to an arm bar and just kind of ran out of time, and also, of course, was being conscious to keep the position so he didn't have to deal with the guy, for the last 30 seconds going crazy trying to knock him out. Because that's the dangerous thing about a sport where, in basketball, if you're up by 20 points, you could just hand the guy the ball for the last 30 seconds. It doesn't matter. They can't go so crazy that they win. But in MMA, you can be winning every round. And in the last 30 seconds, the other guy still has the chance to just go completely crazy and try and knock you out. So, it's great to end the fight on top, controlling the other guy where they can't go crazy and try and knock you out. And like the smart fighter that he is, he did that. And I also liked, he had some passion in his voice after the fight. He's a very I say boring, that's what everyone calls him, guy. What that means is just that he's a respectful family guy. He's a martial artist. He's not a trash talker. He's not a flashy guy. But, he said, listen, what do I have to do? He said, Joe Rogan, UFC, what do I have to do? Do I have to act crazy and yell and throw stuff and cuss? I've never missed weight. I'm 11-1 in the UFC. I think he's won like 5 fights in a row now, something like that. I mean, he's got a point, and he's got a decision win over Marlon Moraes, who's the other top contender right now. Unfortunately, I think he'll still get passed up by Marlon Moraes for the title shot because Moraes has been knocking people out in the first minute of fights, and that's what people want to see. But I'm always cheering for Rafael Assunção. Love that guy. So before that, Lando Venata lost a unanimous decision to Drakkar Klose. I actually picked Lando to win the unanimous. So literally the exact opposite of what I said was going to happen happened. So that was kind of, I missed this one. I missed the vote on this one. I was confident in my pick. No excuses here. Drakkar Klose just seems to me like he's matured a lot, and he seemed light years beyond the fighter who was at his hometown. Was it in Detroit? I think it was in Detroit. He had a hometown showing against David Taymor and was just frustrated and, basically just looked confused, like, why is this guy not doing what I want him to do so my game plan will work? And just not trying to be at all, he wasn't trying to make any adjustments. He's got the same coaches as far as I know and everything. He just looked like he's matured a lot. And it's interesting, I actually found out that he has a baby on the way. He's going to be a first-time dad. So I wonder if maybe he's that. I mean, some people, if they find out they have a kid on the way, it kind of changes you a little bit, I guess. I don't have any kids, but, I've heard people say, hey, once I knew I had a kid on the way, I really had to focus more. I had to clean up my act, or, I had to get a better job. Maybe that's the way he's looking at it. Maybe he's taking it more seriously now, and maybe just losing his first fight ever, maybe having that undefeated record stopped. Maybe that made him worry less. Maybe now that he's already lost once, he knows it's not that bad. I don't know, but either way, he looked like he's changed his mentality, and I was very impressed, and I can't wait to see what is next for him. So before that, let's see. I think before that was maybe Curtis Millender, getting a unanimous decision in a somewhat boring fight against Max Griffin. I didn't even pick a winner in this fight. So I don't really care that much about it. The one thing I will say is Max Griffin, his striking, I feel like there's some things that are just instinctive and are really hard to train out of you. He winces every time someone even looks like they're about to hit him, and he closes his eyes when he throws punches. That's terrible to see at the UFC level. So I'm not sure. I feel like he maybe he already has. I don't know. I feel like he needs to spend some time maybe in just a straight boxing gym, just to get used to seeing punches coming at you without freaking out quite that bad. I guess easy for me to say from behind this microphone, but I see other guys in the UFC who look a lot less afraid of getting hit. And I think that even if it's just a matter of working on your poker face, that's still important, because you give the other person confidence when you look that terrified of getting hit. Dan Hooker, I picked him to win by third round finish over Gilbert Burns, and he actually got it done in the first round. And afterwards, he didn't even really take very much credit. He said, listen, this guy cuts too much weight. He shouldn't be getting knocked out by that punch. He said it was an accurate punch, but I didn't even hit him hard, and he got knocked out because he cuts too much weight. Dan Hooker seems very passionate about this. He was fighting at featherweight for a while and was kind of a middle of the pack to lower level featherweight, and now he's storming the lightweight ranks, and I think that's because he says it's because he's a way more intelligent fighter when he isn't cutting all that weight, because his brain doesn't feel foggy. So he's able to make decisions better and follow the plan better and just be better everywhere. I think that's really interesting, and I definitely think he's correct. I've talked on this podcast or show or whatever about how I'm not a big fan of all these extreme weight cuts. But hey, some guys are going to do it. But either way, Hooker gets the win. He looked great. He kind of got woke up with a big right hand from Gilbert Burns. Looked like maybe he was slightly bothered by it, but not too much. He returned some good calf kicks after Gilbert Burns was landing some traditional on the thigh leg kicks, and then basically from there he defended a shot. He defended a takedown. He landed some good punches. He defended a takedown with a very, I think it was a Darce attempt, but not that he's probably not going to submit Gilbert Burns with a Darce. Gilbert Burns is a world-class grappler, but kind of like with that Anthony Pettis change of mind that we talked about a minute ago, if you instantly threaten someone's neck, it makes them a little less likely to shoot on you. And then from there, Hooker landed a nice right hand, kind of buzzed, kind of sat Gilbert Burns down for a second, and then we got back up, landed a big left hook, and that was all she wrote. So good win by Hooker, and he just says, hey, I'm ready to get someone who's ranked. He said the UFC's getting these guys hurt. They're putting these guys in here that aren't good enough to be fighting me, and they're getting hurt because of it. So, I don't know if that might be a little bit extreme. I don't think Gilbert Burns is unworthy of fighting him, but I understand he wants a big fight, so we'll see what happens next with his career. And before that, Emily Whitmire beat Jamie Moyle by decision. I will kind of halfway watch this fight. I think I was in the shower listening to it maybe. I didn't pick a winner on this fight. Wasn't too interested in it, but we'll see where Emily Whitmire goes from here. Jamie Moyle, I know she's training at Team Alpha Male now apparently, so hopefully she'll continue to improve with that group. But definitely, kind of lower tier straw weights. We'll see where they go from here. All right. So, yeah, that was UFC 226. Biggest takeaway of the night is that DC is now the double champ. I was incredibly excited about this. I love DC. Huge fan. Can't wait to watch him knock Brock Lesnar's head off. And, yeah, I think that fight, they're saying November, but Brock Lesnar, he has, now I say has, the UFC can probably work their way around it with some type of, secretive business if they want to, but technically I think he has to be in the USADA drug testing for at least 6 months and then plus finish the rest of a suspension. I'm pretty sure the date I read is that the beginning of May. He would have had to been in there secretly since the beginning of May in order for this fight to take place in December. I think that they're gonna, so people are saying, oh, it will probably be in January. My prediction, or they're saying late January, I think they're gonna split the difference, and I think they will kind of maybe slightly BS how long he's already been in the testing pool, but not by enough that anyone really cares. And I think they'll make this the end of the year headliner. I think they're going to go for Conor McGregor versus Khabib for the Madison Square Garden November pay-per-view, and then the big end of the year / New Year's Eve pay-per-view, depending on what date that is. But basically their last one of the year, I think, is when they will bring out Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Cormier. It'll be interesting to see when that what those dates are. We'll look. You know what? Actually, stay on here for one more second, and I'm gonna see if I can figure out what. Let's see, December of 2018. The 29th is a Saturday. So, yeah, I guess it would be on Saturday, the 29th of December would be when they would maybe be targeting that pay-per-view. But we'll have to see. All right, so I hope you enjoyed UFC 226 as much as I did. I may get back on here for a brief talk of some of the fights this weekend, but there's a good chance I will not, in which case I will maybe put out a few more pieces of content in the interim, but mostly be gearing up for the back-to-back big weekends. On July 28th, we have UFC on Fox, Poirier vs. Alvarez 2, and on August 4th, I believe, we have the pay-per-view UFC 227, which is Dillashaw Garbrandt 2, and Mighty Mouse Cejudo 2. So I'll be back for that, and I hope to